In the world of Game of Thrones, Littlefinger once said that chaos isn't a pit, but a ladder. It's a brutal world where knights in shining armor lose their heads and entire kingdoms fall overnight. We watched for years as characters scrambled for the Iron Throne, waging bloody wars and forming fragile alliances. Many believed that the strongest armies, the purest bloodlines, or the most righteous claims would win the day. They were all wrong. The real winners in this game were not the strongest, but the most cunning. They knew that the true conflicts take place within the enemy's thoughts and behind the shadows of the court. They were the players who knew the rules of a very old game. What if I told you their winning playbook wasn't forged in Westeros? What if it was written down over 2,500 years ago by a Chinese general? How did characters like Tywin Lannister win wars before they were even fought? The answer lies in one of the most important books ever written on strategy. It explains the cold logic behind the rise of Littlefinger and the fall of the Starks. It provides a terrifyingly accurate blueprint for power. And by the end of this video, you will see it too. That ancient text is The Art of War by Sun Tzu. It's a book many people think is just about military tactics, about swords and shields and battlefield formations. But that's like saying Game of Thrones is just a story about dragons. The Art of War is a masterclass in psychology, manipulation, and the art of winning before the battle even begins. It's about understanding human nature, exploiting weakness, and mastering the flow of information. As we'll see, Game of Thrones shows us that power is a game. The Art of War gives us the rulebook. In this video, we will decode the strategies of Westeros's greatest players using 4 key principles from Sun Tzu. We will explore why deception is the ultimate weapon and why knowing your enemy's mind is more important than knowing how to fight. But this is more than just a story. It is a blueprint. The key to reading it is understanding these timeless principles. And here's the most important part. I will show you how these same rules apply right now in your own life. They explain the power dynamics in your office, the tactics of modern politicians, and the subtle games of social influence. By the end, you'll have a new framework for seeing the hidden currents of power that shape our world. So let's begin with the first and most foundational principle of Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu wrote that all warfare is based on deception. This doesn't just mean surprise attacks, it means controlling the very reality your opponent perceives. It means making your enemies see what you want them to see, believe what you want them to believe, and feel what you want them to feel. No one in Westeros understood this better than Lord Peter Baelish, also known as Littlefinger. He was a man with no army, no great name, and no physical strength. His only weapon was information, and his battlefield was the truth itself. Consider how the entire Game of Thrones was set in motion. It began with a single whispered lie from Littlefinger to Catelyn Stark. He falsely implicated the Lannisters in the attack on her son, Bran. This one piece of masterful disinformation pitted 2 of the most powerful houses in Westeros against each other. He didn't need to raise a sword. He just planted a seed of doubt and let his enemies water it with their own paranoia and mistrust. While they fought and bled on the battlefield, he climbed the ladder of chaos they created. Similarly, Varys, the master of whisperers, used his network of little birds not just to gather secrets, but to shape events. He understood that information isn't just power, it's a current that can be directed to move the great ships of state. By leaking a rumor here or intercepting a message there, he could prevent wars or start them. He appeared to be a harmless, effeminate courtier, a mask that caused powerful men to underestimate him at their peril. This was his greatest deception, the illusion of being a pawn when he was, in fact, a player. So, how does this apply to a world without dragons and thrones? The scary answer is perfectly. In the 21st century, your reputation is the battlefield. Think about corporate politics. A strategically leaked memo can derail a project. A carefully managed narrative on social media can build a personal brand or destroy a competitor's. When a politician frames an opponent with a single cutting nickname, they are practicing a form of Sun Tzu's deception. They are creating a reality in the minds of voters that is more powerful than any policy debate. Littlefinger would have thrived on the internet, using anonymity and misinformation to set his rivals against each other while he collected the spoils. They are all fighting a war of perception. This principle is about manufacturing the truth that serves you best. The lesson from Littlefinger and Varys is that you don't need an army to topple a king. You just need the right lie told to the right person at the right time. This brings us to our next principle, which explains why Littlefinger succeeded where so many others failed. He didn't just understand deception. He understood people. But deception alone isn't enough, is it? What happens when you're the one being deceived? That brings us to Sun Tzu's second and perhaps most important principle. The second core principle is one of Sun Tzu's most famous quotes: "Know your enemy and know yourself, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles." This is the essence of psychological strategy. It's not about knowing your enemy's troop strength, but their pride, their fear, their ambition, and their blind spots. And knowing yourself means being brutally honest about your own weaknesses, limitations, and the reputation you project. To understand this principle, we must turn from a villain like Littlefinger to a very different kind of player, Tyrion Lannister. Tyrion survived in a world that despised him, not through strength or magic, but through his mind. He perfectly embodied the second half of this principle. He knew himself. He once advised Jon Snow to wear your weakness like armor, and it can never be used to hurt you. Tyrion knew he was seen as a drunken, degenerate imp, so he embraced that perception, using it as a shield to mask his brilliant strategic mind. People constantly underestimated him, and that was his advantage. But he also mastered the first part, knowing his enemy. Remember his trial at the Eyrie when Catelyn Stark accused him of murder? He was surrounded by enemies in a place where his name and money meant little. He could not win by force, so he won by psychology. He knew the Vale's obsession with honor, Catelyn's grief-fueled rage, and Lysa Arryn's paranoid instability. He used their own code against them by demanding a trial by combat, a move they couldn't refuse without looking like hypocrites. He turned their psychology into his escape route. Now contrast Tyrion with characters who failed this principle, like Ned and Robb Stark. Ned Stark knew himself. He was a man of honor. But he utterly failed to understand his enemies in King's Landing. He assumed they would play by his rules of honor, and it cost him his life. His son, Robb, was a brilliant battlefield tactician. But a poor psychologist. He knew how to fight his enemies, but he didn't know them. He failed to understand the wounded pride of Walder Frey, and he paid the ultimate price for it. This principle is the foundation of all successful strategy because it is about predicting human behavior. In the modern world, this is the core skill of any great negotiator, manager, or diplomat. When you go into a salary negotiation, you must know your own value and limits. You also need to understand your manager's pressures, the firm's financial condition, and whether they fear losing you more than paying a higher salary. That is knowing your enemy. A great leader doesn't just give orders, they understand the motivations and fears of each person on their team to get the best out of them. They navigate difficult personalities not by confronting them, but by understanding what drives them. It's about seeing the hidden chessboard of human desires and fears that underlies every interaction. Tyrion survived because he saw that board more clearly than anyone. He didn't just play the game, he understood the players. If you enjoy seeing the hidden patterns that drive the world, you are in the right place. Consider subscribing to join a community of people who think strategically and see the world as it is, not just as it appears. Robb Stark's failure to understand his enemy led to one of the most brutal events in the entire series, the Red Wedding. And that event is a perfect, if horrifying, illustration of our third principle. Sun Tzu taught that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. This is the pinnacle of strategy. It means winning so decisively on the political, economic, and psychological fronts that a physical battle becomes unnecessary or impossible for your foe. And the architect of this kind of victory in Westeros was Tywin Lannister. Tywin was losing the war against Robb Stark on the battlefield. Robb was a military genius, winning every battle. So Tywin changed the battlefield from the mud and steel of combat to the wine and whispers of a wedding hall. He could not defeat Robb's army, so he took it off the board entirely. He didn't fight the Starks and their allies, he got their own allies, the Freys and the Boltons, to do it for him. By exploiting Walder Frey's wounded pride and Roose Bolton's ambition, Tywin identified the psychological cracks in Robb's coalition. He didn't send a single Lannister soldier to the Red Wedding. He risked nothing of his own, but in one evening he annihilated his primary rival, ended the war in the north, and secured his family's power. It was a monstrous act of treachery, but from a purely strategic perspective, it was a masterpiece. He subdued the enemy without fighting them himself. This illustrates a paradoxical truth about power. The supreme art of war is to win without fighting. The supreme art of power is to make others lose without them knowing you were even in the game. This level of strategic thinking is happening constantly in our world, just with less bloodshed. Think of a corporate hostile takeover. A rival company doesn't attack head-on. Instead, they might buy up stock quietly through intermediaries. They might court disgruntled board members, promising them a better position after the merger. They create internal division and then present themselves as the only solution to the chaos they secretly orchestrated. By the time the CEO realizes what's happening, the company has already been lost from within. The enemy was subdued without a single direct fight in the marketplace. On a geopolitical scale, this is the essence of soft power, using cultural and economic influence to achieve what armies cannot. It is about making your victory seem like an inevitability or even a desirable outcome for your opponent. Tywin Lannister mastered this dark art, reminding us that the most decisive move is often the one made in a quiet room, not on a loud battlefield. But what if you have no army, no power, and no allies to betray? What if all you have is chaos? Sun Tzu has a rule for that, too. This brings us to our fourth and final principle, one that echoes Littlefinger's philosophy, but on a far grander scale. In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity. A masterful strategist doesn't just survive chaos, they use its energy to propel themselves forward. They see instability not as a threat, but as a moment when the rigid rules of the old order can be broken and rewritten. And the ultimate embodiment of this principle is Daenerys Targaryen. She began her journey with nothing. She was an exiled princess, sold like property, with no allies, no army, and no home. Her entire story is a series of turning moments of absolute chaos into staggering gains of power. Consider the moment she arrives in Astapor to buy the army of the Unsullied. On the surface, she is in a position of weakness. She has only one dragon, her most valuable asset, and is forced to trade it for an army. The slave masters are arrogant, seeing her as a foolish little girl they can easily swindle. This was a chaotic, high-stakes negotiation where she seemingly had no leverage. But Daenerys uses the chaos of the transaction to rewrite the rules completely. Once the deal is done and she has control of the Unsullied, she unleashes her dragon, burns the masters, and frees the slaves. She doesn't just buy an army, she earns their loyalty and keeps her dragon. She found opportunity in the chaos of a corrupt system and shattered it to her advantage. This pattern repeats itself throughout her journey. When she is abandoned by her Dothraki horde, she walks into the fire and emerges with 3 dragons, turning a moment of loss into the birth of her power. When trapped by enemies, she burns them alive and unites the Dothraki under her command. Where others see endings, she finds beginnings. In our world, this principle is the heart of entrepreneurship and innovation. Every market downturn, every technological disruption, every shift in consumer behavior is a form of chaos. Most companies try to weather the storm, to survive. The Daenerys-like figures are the ones who ask, how can this chaos be used? Think of how Airbnb found opportunity in empty spare rooms and a distrust of hotels during a recession. They didn't create a new hotel chain, they harnessed the chaos of an inefficient market. On a personal level, this principle applies to moments of crisis. Losing a job can be a devastating crisis, or it can be the chaotic moment that forces you to start the business you always dreamed of. The strategic mind doesn't ask for a stable world, it asks for a world with leverage points. Chaos, for the prepared, is just a world full of leverage. So we've seen how deception, psychological insight, indirect victory, and chaos were the true weapons in the Game of Thrones. Now we fulfill our promise to bring this from the world of fiction into your world. How do you spot these tactics in your own life? It's not about being cynical or paranoid. It's about being a clear-eyed observer of human nature. Here's a simple framework, a set of questions to ask yourself. The next time you're in an important meeting, watching a political debate, or even just scrolling through social media, stop and ask three things. Who is controlling the information? Who is framing the conversation? What is being said? And more importantly, what is being left unsaid? Who understands the psychology of the room? Who is appealing not to logic, but to ego, fear, or ambition? The most dangerous person in the room isn't the one with the loudest voice. It's the one who understands everyone. It's the one who understands everyone else's fears. Who is trying to win without a direct confrontation? Look for the person who is building consensus behind the scenes, isolating their rivals, or making their desired outcome seem like the only logical choice. These three questions will act as your new lens. They will help you cut through the noise and see the game being played underneath the surface. You'll start to notice the Littlefingers whispering in the corner, the Tyrions observing everyone's tells, and the Tywins orchestrating from afar. This isn't about becoming a manipulator. It's about developing strategic literacy so you can't be easily manipulated. Game of Thrones, viewed through the lens of the art of war, is not just a fantasy story. It's a series of brutal, timeless lessons in the unchanging nature of power. It shows us that deception is constant, psychology is paramount, and the most decisive victories are often silent. The game of power hasn't changed in millennia. Only the players and the stage. The corporate boardroom is just a modern throne room. Social media is our new court of whispers and rumors. The tactics of Sun Tzu are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. If you've ever felt that what people say and what they do are two different things, you are right. Sun Tzu would agree with you. By understanding these rules, you are no longer just a spectator in the game. You start to become a player, or at the very least, someone who can't be played. You move from being a pawn to being someone who sees the entire board. The greatest power is not the throne itself, but the clarity to see the invisible strings that move it. Remember that understanding these rules isn't about being cynical. It's about refusing to be naive. If you found this analysis valuable, show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the strategy of power. It tells the algorithm that strategic thinking is something worth promoting. Until then, watch closely. The game is always being played.